and welcome to this Astranti pre-scene analysis video series for the November 2020 and February 2021 strategic case study exam. And the company that we're going to be focusing on is Knowledge City Technology Park. And Knowledge City Technology Park is an organization that owns and operates a technology park, which is a location for lots of different technology-based businesses to set up and to collaborate and to operate effectively. And it's Knowledge City Technology Park's job to essentially ensure that the infrastructure is there, to ensure that all these businesses can operate effectively and smoothly. Now, that may sound like quite an obscure industry, but it's actually one that is quite interesting, and there are quite a few examples. In fact, there are thousands of these technology parks around the world, famous examples being Silicon Valley and the Ideon Science Park in Sweden. And it's my hope that by the end of this series, you have a really good idea about the company and about the industry, or at least enough to provide you with that context to set you up to operate effectively in the strategic case study exam. Because remember, in the exam, you are playing a role. You have to imagine that you are a senior manager working in a technology park. So I'm just going to break down the contents of the video series. In this first video, the one that you are listening to right now, we're going to give an introduction into the pre-scene and an introduction to the role that you are playing and how to use this pre-scene series. In the second video, we'll then look at technology parks and the actual industry, a bit of information about the technology park industry. And then in the third video, we'll look at Knowledge City Technology Park as a whole. We'll look specifically at that company, and in video 4 we'll then move on and look at the various different values of the company and the structure of the company, the organizational structure, including the board of directors and any governance issues there. Then for the fifth video, we'll look at some of the news stories at the back of the pre-scene. And students often don't think too much of these. It just looks like reference material, etc. But actually, they're really, really important. They're a really good indicator of where the examiner is heading, because any kind of issue that comes up in those news stories is technically an issue that in this fictional world is gaining press attention. And therefore, it's potential for it to be a likely issue. And that's particularly relevant if it is an issue that doesn't appear to be prevalent throughout the rest of the pre-scene. It looks out of place. If it doesn't appear anywhere else, but then suddenly appears as a random, quite serious issue in the industry, in those news stories, then again, that's a really good indicator that the examiner is heading down that way. So that will be the fifth video. And then we'll return to the extracts from Knowledge City Technology Park for videos at 6 and 7, this time looking at the risks in our specific risk video, and then looking at the financial statements of both Knowledge City Technology Park and one of its leading competitors at SciPark in video 7. But we won't be finished there. We will have 3 more videos for you even after we have finished with the specific pre-scene. We will be looking at the strategic analysis in video 8, and that involves looking at all the various different important models from the CIMA syllabus and applying it to the company. We'll also be building on those models as we go through the pre-scene analysis. We'll then look at our top 10 most likely unseen issues in video 9, and we're very accurate with those over the many, many years and the many different levels that we have been producing this for. We have generally got 70 to 80% of those issues correct. So 70 to 80% 90% of those top 10 issues appear in the exam. And then finally, we'll finish with video 10, which is the industry analysis video, looking more broadly at the industry of technology and science parks. And that's an accompanying video to our industry analysis document, which will have a lot of information about the industry, about similar companies in the real world, and also some industry examples that you can use in your exam. So that's going to be a rough guide to how we are going to take you through this pre-scene video series. So there's quite a lot to get through, but it is my hope that you will really enjoy it and really find it useful. And by the end, you'll have a good idea about Knowledge City Technology Park and the pre-scene, and that will really set you up for answering questions in your exam. Before we begin, just going to give you a brief introduction into who I am and also how we are going to conduct this analysis. My name is Peter Steft and I'm the Senior Strategic Case Study Tutor here at Astranti and also the Masterclass Tutor for those of you who are on the course. And I have many years' experience teaching the case study exam, including teaching the operational and management case study. So how it's going to work with this pre-scene analysis, we're going to look at the pre-scene section by section, identifying the key points and also applying relevant business models from the CIMA syllabus. We'll also be bringing up likely exam issues and some hints and tips for the exam day as well, looking at things that students often do that's incorrect or things that they do that they are correct, etc. And then we'll look at the strategic analysis, which is where we add in all those different CIMA models and apply them to the case, and also our top 10 most likely unseen issues. And what we'll do as we go through the pre-scene analysis is I'll assume that you have no prior knowledge. So I'm going to assume that when you are looking at a particular paragraph in the pre-scene during this analysis series, it's the first time you've ever seen it. We're not going to be applying knowledge from later in the pre-scene, retrospectively. We're not going to be applying material from the industry analysis, etc. We're going to look at it as if it's the first time we've seen it. Other than, of course, the CIMA syllabus. We'll be applying prior knowledge of the CIMA syllabus to the material. And we'll look through each section, make some notes on it, come back and we'll go through it together using my review. And some notes on the pre-scene. The point of them is to give you context. Because most of you watching this video who are taking the strategic case study exam will not be in exactly the same position as the senior manager in the case, which of course is the role that we are playing. You probably work in a different job, in a different industry, etc. You have no idea about their specific industry, or at least you may not have a very good idea about it. But of course, in the exam, you're expected to answer as if you were a senior manager in that specific industry. So the point of the pre-scene is to give you enough background information so that you can make recommendations based on the organization's strategic position and based on what is logical and common within the industry. But do not write anything based on the pre-scene, or at least pre-write any answers based on the pre-scene, because ultimately you are being examined on your ability to answer the questions in the unseen on the exam day, which might be different than the material in the pre-scene. It might go down a different route. It might even contradict it. But if you just focus on writing answers based on the pre-scene, you won't be answering the questions correctly. So in summary, the pre-scene is there to give you background information. But ultimately in the exam, you are answering questions based on the unseen. So let's begin our analysis of the pre-scene properly now, starting with the first page of information, which is the introduction to the company, also to the role that we are playing. And often students dismiss this page. They go straight for the financial statements, they go straight for the risk report, etc. And they skip over this page here. But there's actually a lot of important information that sets the scene for the rest of our analysis. And one key thing we can pick up straight away is that Knowledge City Technology Park is a quoted company. So as a quoted company, it means that it is on the stock market. It has shareholders, so that is an important stakeholder. It can raise finance through equity funding because it is a listed company. So in the first few words, we already have some important information about setting the scene for the position of the organization. Being a listed company is generally considered a strength of an organization, as it provides access to additional funding, but there's also prestige involved with being a listed company as well, and that can help with staffing. You appear to be a more stable company, a larger company, a company with more prestige, as the name would suggest. And they own and operate Technology Park. And Technology Park is the largest in its home country, or sorry, they operate a technology park, which is the largest in its home country. So again, more strengths of the organization here. The park that it operates is the largest, and therefore it's the most powerful. It can attract the best businesses. It has the most money to pay for all the resources required for running a technology park effectively. So when we're thinking about some of our models, such as our Porter's 5 forces, that competition is perhaps reduced slightly by the fact that we are the largest company. We are the dominant player in the market. That will actually allow us to attract perhaps more tenants as well, because as a technology park, we are there to host technology companies. So we want the best tenants to be moving to our park because they're more likely to be successful, therefore they're more likely to stay residents for a longer period of time, etc. We're also attracting the best and brightest, and we're really getting the Knowledge City Technology Park name out there as the place to be if you want to set up your tech business. And on the subject of tenants, that's another key stakeholder. The tenants are essentially the buyers for the organization. They are paying rent to stay, or paying a lease to stay on our technology park. So tenants are a key stakeholder. The employee of those tenants are also a key stakeholder. And we will have to make sure we meet our stakeholders' needs, our tenants' needs, that we are providing them with the resources they need to operate their businesses effectively. So think about what a technology company is. App companies and online companies and software, hardware companies, etc. They're going to need access to vast amounts of data and technology, etc. If they're science companies, then they're going to need access to laboratories. We need to provide all this equipment, all these resources as well, and that's going to be very expensive. So it's also helps reduce the competition because we're already the big, powerful company. It'll be very difficult for new companies to enter this market given the level of resources that are required. But it will be imperative for us that we do provide these resources because that's how we're going to keep our tenants happy. If these tech companies can't access the internet effectively, if they can't share information effectively, then they're going to take their business elsewhere. The park is also located close to the campus of a leading technological university, so that's also very important. A lot of these technology parks are actually set up by universities and have a lot of tie-ins with the universities because the students go to the companies and then they provide some additional academic help, but they also in turn gain some applied knowledge. And the flip side of that is that the people working at the organizations can speak to some of the leading academics in their field. So university tie-ins are very important here, and that's a potential issue as well. That's something that the company may need to look into because the park is not directly affiliated with that university. There are also several other major universities located within 1 hour's drive. So the tie-ins between universities and these tech parks is very prevalent in the real world, and it's a really good opportunity. The organization would be able to set up an arrangement with the university, and then that would be an additional selling point to its various different potential tenants, that we can source academics from this university. And in many cases, universities are directly affiliated with these technology parks, to the point where they're actually owners of them and co-founders of them. An example of this would be Cambridge Science Park, which is in Cambridge in the United Kingdom, one of the leading science technology parks in the United Kingdom, and it was founded by Trinity College, one of the big colleges at Cambridge University, and there's a lot of direct involvement from the university on the technology park. And Cambridge Science Park is just one of thousands of these types of organizations worldwide. In fact, some of the biggest ones in the world are in Shanghai, in China, but some other famous ones would also be the Ideon Science Park in Sweden and Silicon Valley. Of course, everyone's heard of Silicon Valley. It's gone beyond a technology park now. It's almost its own city, its own ecosystem. So that could represent a potential opportunity for the organization in the future. The fact that these sorts of things are very popular all over the world. The company could take the knowledge that is picked up with its current technology park and apply that elsewhere. What has it done that's made it so successful in Adland, and apply that elsewhere? So as you can see, we were only one sentence, or a couple sentences, one paragraph into the pre-scene, into the introduction page, and we've already started to set the scene for the organization. We already see that they are one of the big players in the market. We've already seen that they're a listed company and the strengths that brings, the additional resources that brings for the company. We've identified some of the key stakeholders that the board will have to ensure they keep satisfied. And we've also looked at the kinds of things that, as a technology park, what they'll need to provide for their tenants, and some potential issues with regards to university affiliation and global appeal as well. And the second sentence of this opening page relates to us. It relates to us as the senior manager. We're the senior manager in KCTP's finance function. And we report directly to the board and advise on special projects and strategic matters. So what this should mean to you is this crosses the entire CIMA syllabus, the entire strategic level syllabus. If you look at the actual literature that's provided by CIMA for the role, there are a few key things that are brought out. One of them is that it's our job to analyze options and provide recommendations and to manage projects. That's very much your E2, your E3 material, and that's very present here. But it's not just about the E's. The P's and the F's are very important as well. Also, as part of the role mentioned by CIMA is to identify, analyze, and mitigate risks and suggest appropriate methods of funding. Funding, of course, very important from F3. Do you take debt finance? Do you use equity finance and funding from the markets and from investments? Also, what's your current cash flow position like? We'll come onto this a lot more in the financial statements video. But also risks as well. How do you mitigate risks? It's important when we're going through this that we do pick up on anything that could be a potential risk. And that could be a very obvious one, such as a big health and safety issue or a big ethical issue, or it could be one that is more strategic in nature. Perhaps we have gone down one route to the level that we are not diversified enough, and therefore if anything happens to the technology park market, we will be in trouble. How do we perhaps diversify our revenue streams? That's an example of a strategic risk. But the important thing here is that you must be aware of risks. You must be aware of funding and finance, and also growth opportunities as well, and the methods of growth, business valuations, etc., as well as your options analysis and your general leadership from your e-materials. So there's a lot that you need to be aware of, and I do advise you to look at the materials, look at the core activity statements that are provided by CIMA. It's a series of I-CAN statements, and I advise you to look through it and ask yourself, can you do that? Can you recognize risks? Can you recognize potential ethical breaches, etc.? And if you can't say, yes, I can, then that will help pinpoint your theory revision. Because this exam is not about theory. You've been tested on theory already. It's about application of theory. But of course, you need to know the theory to a reasonable extent in order to do that. So think of those I can statements as really useful checklists for making sure that you are revising the right material. I'm not suggesting you go back and reread through every single E3, P3, F3 study text chapter in great detail, but help yourself by pinpointing your areas for improvement using those I can statements. And on the subject of playing the role, one thing that students often do, which is really important that you make sure you don't do this, is you play the role effectively. You have to answer all these questions as if you are a senior manager. You need to think like a senior manager at KCTP. You need to act like a senior manager at KCTP as well. You are not a third-party consultant. Talk about it in the we, in the what we should do, our revenues, etc. Not KCTP are doing this when they could be doing that. That would be good for KCTP. You're not a third-party consultant. You need to think and act like a senior manager within the organization. And also remember your audience. You are reporting directly to the board and advising them on special projects and strategic matters. This means you must provide adequate recommendations. You must analyze all your information that you're given in the unseen and come up with an appropriate recommendation. Think about the board of directors of the company that you work for, if you work for a company that has a board of directors. And say that you were asked to provide them with some information. What would you give them? What would they expect? Would they expect you to come into the boardroom and give a very nice detailed presentation that was nice and succinct with a key recommendation, some key learnings? Or would you walk into the boardroom with a huge stack of printed out spreadsheets under your arm, chuck it all over the boardroom table and then say, make something of that, turn around and walk out? Of course you wouldn't do that. And you shouldn't do that here either. You should always make sure you're giving a thorough recommendation. And the final paragraph on this section, we have some information about the company and its location. It's located in Adland, and that's a developed country, so that's very important for the kind of business that KCTP is in. If it was a developing country, it wouldn't have as much access to technology, etc., and has an active and well-regulated stock exchange. So this is important because as a listed company, we're going to have to adhere to lots of rules and regulations. And the currency is the A dollar. Whenever you see about dollars or currencies mentioned in the pre-teach, think about all the things that may entail. Could there be any economic impact if there is a market depression, etc.? And they give you information about how the A dollar is performing. If there is any talk about global opportunities, how the A dollar is performing compared to other currencies as well, and how can you hedge against losses from trading overseas as well, whether you lead or lag your payments. And of course, they are in accordance with the International Financial Reporting Standards. So of course, you would have to account for any translation and transaction risk in your accounts as well. But it does mean that there is definitely scope for the company to look at potential opportunities overseas, whether that's establishing a new park or whether that's working with technology companies through telecommunications, etc., in other countries, because the company does compile its reports in accordance with the International Financial Reporting Standards, and there's also talking here about the currencies that are used within the country. So now that we have looked through the first page, we can start compiling our models together using what we've looked at, but also some general knowledge about business as well. So what we're going to do now is create a pastel analysis. Of course, pastel being a very important way for assessing the greater industry that you operate in. Not the specific industry like Five Forces, but the greater industry and environment. And P stands for political. So this is political factors that will affect the environment that the company operates in. So the government's attitude towards technology will be very important here. If it's a government that really supports entrepreneurialism and investing in small businesses, particularly tech companies, then that's going to have a positive impact. On the other hand, if a new government comes in and it's one that's very conservative and restrictive and doesn't want to invest in businesses, etc., then that could have a big impact, particularly if they don't offer decent tax breaks for small and developing businesses. The economic position of the country is good as well. It's a developed organization with a well-regulated stock exchange, and that means that there's likely to be companies that are willing to invest in these small startup businesses, venture capitalists, etc. So that creates a fertile environment for these organizations, which are going to use the services provided by KCTP. Socially as well, the demographics of a country, the amount of younger people who are generally more involved in tech as well, a lot more people taking technology-based courses at universities, etc. That's going to affect the amount of people starting businesses or working at tech companies, which will have a direct impact on KCTP. Technology, the pace of development is important here, because the whole point of these technology parks is that the company itself, KCTP, will be the one that is providing a lot of this equipment. Because if you think about a laboratory with very expensive equipment in a very small startup business isn't necessarily going to have that asset. They're not going to be able to purchase it. So instead, they lease a location that already has it. So it's KCTP that's providing this technology. So if it gets out of date very, very quickly and needs to be replaced at a quick rate, then that is going to be expensive for the organization. Also, the environment as well, the impact and the damage to the environment with a lot of electricity, etc. being used. Also, the park itself. How much green space does it take up? What are the plans to expand it? Is it going to involve mowing down more fields and trees, etc., and putting up more buildings and having a negative impact on the environment? And on the subject of that, that's also another stakeholder there, the community and the local public around where the business park is. And both the community and the public will be very interested and have high expectations of KCTP to abide by all rules and regulations and provide employment for the local area and not do anything that damages the area. Affiliation with universities is also an important potential issue. The fact that they have spoken about how it's located close to several other major universities also somewhat implies that there is some sort of relationship with these universities. So those universities and their respective students will also be important stakeholders to the organization. If they are involved with them, they have to meet their needs as well. So you can already see that we're starting to develop a lot of information based on the company. We've looked at potential issues, we've looked at some strengths, we've looked at the environment, we've looked at the specific industry that it's in, we've looked at the other types of real-world companies that are similar to KCTP. So if we'd skipped over this first page that I mentioned several students do, we actually would have lost a lot of important information. And all of this information might be somewhat speculative at the moment, but we've already got this in our mind now. So when we are progressing through the rest of the pre-scene, we're thinking about risks, we're thinking about strategic options, we're thinking about funding, we're thinking about the Pestel analysis and our impact on the environment and the pace of technological development. We're thinking about our tenants, employees, our shareholders, the universities, and also our competitors. So getting all this information down now is really important because we're going to build on it as we continue through the pre-scene. And there's a lot of information to get through, and so there's going to be a lot we can add to these growing models and growing pieces of information. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it, and more importantly, you have found it useful. Just going to take a moment to tell you about the courses that we produce here at Astranti for our case studies. And all of the products that you see here are available as standard as part of the course, but they are also available for purchase individually. We have the Exam Technique series, which is a study text and a video series, which looks at how to plan your answers, how to read the material and analyze the material effectively, and to manage your time effectively in the exam, which is incredibly important. Most people who fail the case study exam fail it because of poor exam technique. So that's a really important video series for you to watch to ensure that you've got that technique. Because there is a specific technique to sitting the case study exam, and all will be revealed in that video series. And do head over to the website for more information about it. We then have our theory revision series, which again is a study text and a video series, and that looks at the specific theories that are relevant to the case study, because a lot of the material from the E's, the P's, the F's won't appear in the case study. It's only specific topics that are frequently tested in the case study. So to save you from revising all the E's and all the F's and all the P's, we've created a more condensed revision series to refresh yourself of the knowledge that you'll need for the exam. We then have our pre-scene analysis series, which looks through the pre-scene page by page, bringing out the important points. In addition to that video series, there is also a video that looks at the top 10 most likely unseen issues, and also the strategic analysis video, which takes all the key models from the CIMA syllabus and applies them to the case. We then have our industry analysis pack, which is a large document that looks at the industry that the pre-scene is based on, looks at all the real companies that are actually operating in that actual industry in the real world, looks at how they market, what the suppliers are, what the key stakeholders are, how they operate, industry trends, and also a series of industry examples that you can use and reference in your exam. And we've got sample paragraphs to show you how you would use it in the exam, and that's a document. There's also an accompanying video with it. We have our mock exams, which are based on actual exams, but they feature the reference to the actual case, so they're on the actual case that you will sit the exam on. We've done our best to make them as close to the actual exams as possible, and you can actually sit those online in an online system that replicates the one that you'll use on the exam day. So you can really test yourself under exam conditions, and we provide marking and feedback for those mocks as well, where you'll get a tutor that will analyze your script and will give you a comprehensive document providing you with information not only on your actual script, as in whether you passed and failed and what you should have brought up and what you shouldn't have brought up, etc. But we'll also give you an appraisal on your technique as well, how to improve your exam technique. We then have our question packs, which is a series of shorter mock style questions based around the core activities. So if you find that you really struggle with certain parts of the CIMA syllabus, that will be a really good way for helping you. For example, if it's the core activity A's that you're always struggling with, or the B's that you're struggling with, you can look at the specific core activity A pack, which will give you questions based on those subjects. And then we have our masterclasses. We have 2 live all-day masterclasses, one at the start of the course and one at the end of the course. The one at the start of the course will give you all sorts of hints and tips on how to plan, how to use your time effectively. We'll also go through the planning process live, which will be really helpful for you as you progress into your mock exams. And then we have the revision masterclass right at the end, which looks at everything you've covered, gives you a refresher on everything you've covered over the 6-week period, and that's going to be really useful for giving you those little extra hints and tips to get you the extra marks in the exam. So do head over to the website www Astranti.com for more information about those. And I hope to see you again for the next video.